You are famous for being straightforward, you Ridds. Just treat me as I would treat you now." I looked at my mother, for a glance from her would have sent Tom out of the window; but she checked me with her hand, and said, "You have some ground of complaint, sir. I will not deny it. Now I will be as straightforward with you as even a Ridd is supposed to be. My son and myself have all along disliked your marriage with Annie. Not for what you have been so much as for what we fear you will be. Have patience one moment, if you please. We do not fear your taking to the highway life again; for that you are too clever, no doubt, now that you have property. But we fear that you will take to drinking, and to squandering money. There are many examples of this around us, and we know what the fate of the wife is. It has been hard to tell you this, under our own roof, and with our own—" Here mother hesitated. "Spirits and cider and beer," I broke in. "Out with it, like a Ridd, mother, as he will have all of it." "Spirits and cider and beer," said mother very firmly after me; and then she gave way and said, "You know, Tom, you are welcome to every drop and more of it." Now Tom must have had a far sweeter temper than ever I could claim; for I should have thrust my glass away, and never have taken another drop in the house where such a check had met me. But instead of that, Master Faggus replied, with a pleasant smile, "I know that I am welcome, good mother; and to prove it, I will have some more." And thereupon he mixed himself another glass of Hollands with lemon and hot water, yet pouring it very delicately. "Oh, I have been so miserable! Take a little more, Tom," said mother, handing the bottle. "Yes, take a little more," I said; "you have mixed it over weak, Tom." "If ever there was a sober man," cried Tom, complying with our request, "if ever there was in Christendom a man of perfect sobriety, that man is now before you. Shall we say to morrow week, mother? It will suit your washing day." "How very thoughtful you are, Tom! Now John would never have thought of that, in spite of all his steadiness." "Certainly not," I answered proudly. "When my time comes for Lorna, I shall not study Betty Muxworthy." In this way the Squire got over us; and Farmer Nicholas Snowe was sent for, to counsel with mother about the matter, and to set his two daughters sewing. When the time for the wedding came, there was such a stir and commotion as had never been known in the parish of Oare since my father's marriage. For Annie's beauty and kindliness had made her the pride of the neighbourhood; and the presents sent her, from all around, were enough to stock a shop with. Master Stickles, who could now walk, and who certainly owed his recovery, with the blessing of God, to Annie, presented her with a mighty Bible, silver clasped, and very handsome, beating the parson's out and out, and for which he had sent to Taunton. Even the common troopers, having tasted her cookery many times, to help out their poor rations, clubbed together, and must have given at least a week's pay apiece, to have turned out what they did for her. This was no less than a silver pot, well designed, but suited surely rather to the bridegroom's taste than bride's. In a word, everybody gave her things. And now my Lorna came to me, with a spring of tears in appealing eyes; for she was still somewhat childish, or rather I should say more childish now than when she lived in misery; and she placed her little hand in mine, and she was half afraid to speak, and dropped her eyes for me to ask. "What is it, little darling?" I asked, as I saw her breath come fast, for the smallest emotion moved her form. "You don't think, John, you don't think, dear, that you could lend me any money?" "All I have got," I answered. "How much do you want, dear heart?" "I have been calculating, and I fear that I cannot do any good with less than £10, John." Here she looked up at me with horror at the grandeur of the sum, and not knowing what I could think of it. But I kept my eyes from her. "£10!" I said in my deepest voice, on purpose to have it out in comfort, when she should be frightened. "What can you want with £10, child?" "That is my concern," said Lorna, plucking up her spirit at this. "When a lady asks for a loan, no gentleman pries into the cause of her asking it." "That may be as may be," I answered in a judicial manner. "£10, or 20, you shall have; but I must know the purport." "Then that you never shall know, John. I am very sorry for asking you. It is not of the smallest consequence. Oh dear, no." Herewith she was running away. "Oh dear, yes," I replied, "it is of very great consequence, and I understand the whole of it. You want to give that stupid Annie, who has lost you 100,000 pounds, and who is going to be married before us, dear, God only can tell why, being my younger sister, you want to give her a wedding present. And you shall do it, darling, because it is so good of you. Don't you know your title, love? How humble you are with us humble folk. You are Lady Lorna something, so far as I can make out yet, and you ought not even to speak to us. You will go away and disdain us." "If you please, talk not like that, John. I will have nothing to do with it, if it comes between you and me, John." "You cannot help yourself," said I. And then she vowed that she could and would; and rank and birth were banished from between our lips in no time. "What can I get her good enough? I am sure I do not know," she asked. "She has been so kind and good to me, and she is such a darling. How I shall miss her, to be sure. By the by, you seem to think, John, that I shall be rich some day." "Of course you will. As rich as the French king who keeps ours. Would the Lord Chancellor trouble himself about you, if you were poor?" "Then, if I am rich, perhaps you would lend me 20 pounds, dear John. 10 pounds would be very mean for a wealthy person to give her." To this I agreed, upon condition that I should make the purchase myself, whatever it might be. For nothing could be easier than to cheat Lorna about the cost, until time should come for her paying me. And this was better than to cheat her for the benefit of our family. For this end, and for many others, I set off to Dulverton, bearing more commissions, more messages, and more questions than a man of thrice my memory might carry so far as the corner where the saw pit is. And to make things worse, one girl or other would keep on running up to me, or even after me, when started, with something or other she had just thought of, which she could not possibly do without, and which I must be sure to remember as the most important of the whole. To my dear mother, who had partly outlived the exceeding value of trifles, the most important matter seemed to ensure Uncle Reuben's countenance and presence at the marriage. And if I succeeded in this, I might well forget all the maidens' trumpery. This she would have been wiser to tell me when they were out of hearing, for I left her to fight her own battle with them, and laughing at her predicament, promised to do the best I could for all, so far as my wits would go. Uncle Reuben was not at home, but Ruth, who received me very kindly, although without any expressions of joy, was sure of his return in the afternoon, and persuaded me to wait for him. And by the time that I had finished all I could recollect of my orders, even with paper to help me, the old gentleman rode into the yard, and was more surprised than pleased to see me. But if he was surprised, I was more than that. I was utterly astonished at the change in his appearance since the last time I had seen him. From a hale and rather heavy man, gray-haired but plump and ruddy, he was altered to a shrunken, wizened, trembling, and almost decrepit figure. Instead of curly and comely locks, grizzled indeed, but plentiful, he had only a few lank white hairs scattered and flattened upon his forehead. But the greatest change of all was in the expression of his eyes, which had been so keen and restless and bright, and a little sarcastic. Bright indeed they still were, but with a slow unhealthy lustre; their keenness was turned to perpetual outlook, their restlessness to a haggard want. As for the humour which once gleamed there, which people who fear it call sarcasm, it had been succeeded by stares of terror, and then mistrust, and shrinking. There was none of the interest in mankind, which is needful even for satire. Now what can this be, thought I to myself. Has the old man lost all his property, or taken too much to strong waters? "Come inside, John Ridd," he said. "I will have a talk with you. It is cold out here, and it is too light. Come inside, John Ridd, boy." I followed him into a little dark room, quite different from Ruth Huckaback's. It was closed from the shop by an old division